I'd like to welcome back Ian and Malcolm to talk about where we're going to the future.
All right, thanks, Andrew. Right, so as Ian promised you yesterday, we're going to go into a bit more depth about our road to get to IfSE and what happens once we've achieved that, as long as we get the vote to do it. So today we'll take you through a bit of that. We're going to sort of ask him questions. He will give you the answers. So you're going to see four elements to it. So we'll start with a bit of a recap. Why do we want to do it? Where do we want to end up? Where are we now? So to let you know exactly where we've got to. And then what is going to happen next in the very near future, we hope, once we've sorted out the last few things with the Engineering Council. So, Ian, if you would like to take us through why we want to do it.
So why do this at all? Well, in some ways, starting at the bottom, there's massive confusion as to INCOSE and INCOSE UK. I mean, when I've met people from the Royal Academy and Engineering Council, it's always welcome to Ian, President of INCOSE. I have to say, no, I'm not President of INCOSE, I'm President of INCOSE UK. It's not a great start to any meeting to have to correct people and getting your title wrong. And from there, the frustration starts to build. So, I mean, we were founded as the UK chapter of INCOSE, but when you look through our actual memorandum of association and the articles, INCOSE appears once, and that's in our name, and that's the only thing. We are founded as a separate organisation currently. In reality, you all have dual membership. Your membership of INCOSE UK and also INCOSE, and that duality comes from the agreement with INCOSE to allow you to become a member of there as well. So we already have that duality, but it's all got a bit confused. The boundaries aren't very clear. And that wasn't such a problem over the years, but now that we're actually licensed by somebody else, in fact regulated by the Engineering Council, it starts to matter because we have to have pretty clear boundaries on what's us and what's the UK chapter and how it all fits together. So it's becoming more and more important just to have that boundary, that scope, that classic engineering thing, really, of just actually saying kind of what fits where, how does it all fit together. So we're in a situation where we are now under the started regulatory regime. It's stronger than the INCOSE governance. The name's confusing. And when you look through the list of all the professional engineering institutes, we do stick out as being a bit off compared to everything else, because everything else pretty much is institution of this or for this, and then you go down and you find this slightly crazy INCOSE UK, the UK chapter of the International Council on Sustainable Engineering. It's not a good look. It doesn't help people know what you are because it's a bit of a mouthful, and far too many people want to expand INCOSE to its full length to work out what that is. In doing so, it just doesn't look right. So we really would like to look like, well, all these people that say institution or institute of or for, because that's kind of what the marketplace is. So playing to our own marketplace, it would make sense to look the same, be the same, and be more obvious what we're actually here for. In terms of context, so as I said, we've been inside two different regulatory and governance regimes for 2 years now. On the one hand, we have a memorandum of agreement with INCOSE that sets out how we are going to be a chapter. So INCOSE UK Limited shall create and administer a chapter of INCOSE within the UK. That basically means hold 4 events a year, have at least 30 people, and send in reports once a year, and that's it. So effectively, the kind of INCOSE model of a chapter looks a bit like one of our local groups. It's a much smaller scale thing. What we've become is a massive kind of fractal version of INCOSE in some respects. So it's not geared for what we are now. We have massively outgrown the original intention. We're also regulated by the Engineering Council that grants us a license to act as a professional engineering institution, and that has all sorts of obligations around the way we do things. We're properly regulated, there's proper checks on us. It's a much stronger relationship that way than it is that way. And so we decided, and partly actually it was becoming, the fact we now actually want an institution allows us to do this because we couldn't think of a good name before. We've thought of this for quite a while, but it's never quite happened. But the thought we can use institute in the title allows us to have a much better name, which, of course, is and a very slow build. There was music as well, but obviously it's not been turned on.
So what's behind that name? Why did we choose that one?
Well, we actually voted on every single word. So institute or institution was the first one. Institution sounds a bit kind of old-fashioned, a bit kind of set in its ways, a bit, well, not very dynamic. Institute is always seen as being more dynamic and more progressive. So as a progressive thing, institute made more sense. We're a bit younger, more dynamic. We want to be sort of pushing forwards. It's for rather than of, because we can hardly claim to own system engineering because it is kind of out there, but we can claim to be supportive of it and want to see it happen. So we're for system engineering because that's what we want to promote. And if other people are doing it too, great, that's good. We'd like to talk to you, but by all means, we're not going to stop you. Systems, not system, because it has to be plural because we always work with multiple systems. And engineering, hopefully you'll see why we want to do engineering. Obviously, there have been discussions. Should we drop engineering? A bit difficult when you're licensed as an engineering institution, so it's kind of here with us, but we can be a lot more flexible and open to non-engineers to come join the club. And it has been interesting doing some of the recent assessments where I've had someone with a geography degree turn up, who his background is not at all engineering, but the work he's doing is engineering. I can see it quite clearly. And there are routes through now for anyone, really, if you're in the space to come play. So, yeah, it's all about being progressive and being for and wanting to promote the whole thing.
So where do we want to end up? So at the moment, we need to set up IfSE as an entirely new entity with a new set of articles and, importantly, a rule book. So the articles become much smaller than they currently are with using the new model, and our sort of day-to-day, what we as a council can do is set out in the rule book. There are things that have to go in the articles, and they're legal, and we'll get more things about that. We keep hold of INCOSE UK, so they become a sort of subsidiary of IfSE, and we'll retain all the sort of websites and things like that, so we can control that. And our existing MOA with INCOSE and our Engineering Council relationship will be transferred over to IfSE. So they should be seamless, he says. And then all of you, all our members, will get transferred to IfSE. But you will remain INCOSE members as well. So that relationship doesn't change. And what we have to get to is a special resolution which our membership will vote on. So that's where we want to end up. And there's the model slightly redrawn. But showing those relationships. And if you want to add anything.
Yeah, well, there's some good practical reasons behind this.
Yeah.
So effectively, it takes a surprising amount of time to get a new bank account set up for an organisation. So if nothing else, we have to keep INCOSE UK going for long enough until we've got all the banking sorted out. And of course, there's lots of existing, every UCAB company will have some kind of supplier directory or something that has INCOSE UK on there. That's going to have to transfer across, and it all just takes time. So for practical reasons, we're keeping INCOSE UK going as the kind of, certainly as a financial vehicle, and then once we've gradually got everything set up properly, there'll be a transitional period of getting all the different things moved across until eventually we can then sort of drop INCOSE UK into a dormant state. Mm-hmm. Still keep it, but it'll be dormant, and then move it across. So it's practicality, to be honest.
So I think you've gone through some of the benefits before, but you might like to recap.
So certainly confusion is it's a lived thing for us. People are constantly getting it wrong. So just to have that confusion taken away would be hugely helpful. By actually having a new name that resonates with what we do, we think that's a very popular thing. And certainly the vote we had last year to get start on this process, I think we had 24% of membership voted, 95% of people were in favour of going ahead with this. So it does seem to have struck a chord that this is the right thing to do. And then as we go forward, it's that chance to really reshape where we are and what we do. So the new articles give us a much cleaner approach to things. They recognise that you don't have to be in the same place to have a meeting. So as long as you're able to meet by whatever means, that is a meeting. So we can change, exactly. So we can change the way we do things. We can do a lot more. And it has been good. I mean, previously, all of our directors' meetings were all done face-to-face on a quarterly thing, and things kind of drifted until we hit the meeting. We've been able to have regular, we're having a 1-hour Teams meeting, and just do it, get it done, have the vote, move on. Exactly. So modern practices, it means that the AGM, rather than being a kind of a thing that has to fit in around here somewhere, because currently we have to fit face-to-face because that's what our articles say. In the new articles, it's the same thing. As long as you're able to take part in the meeting, so you can hear it, so you can raise your questions, you've got the ability to be a participant, you're there. So going forward, the plan will be to have virtual AGMs probably a week or two ahead of the actual conference, and with the directors saying their own pieces and much more time for Q&A, a much more considered thing.
Absolutely.
So actually, it brings more rigour, if you're honest.
I think you're right. And also, having a name that doesn't have INCOSE in it is not unusual. So the French AFIS,
Germans, GFSE,
the Australians,
CISA.
So
Norway's NORSEC.
yeah,
Italy's
so
AIS something.
it's nothing unfamiliar to INCOSE either. So, yeah, in our discussions with them, they seem on board so far.
Yeah.
So we'll move on to sort of implementation. And so I think we said some of this already before. There's no envisaged change to the current membership benefits from INCOSE. We will still offer certification, still be able to take part in INCOSE-led working groups and IS and IW and things like that. We operate as the INCOSE UK chapter under the MOA. Just the name will change. And some of the bits of governance that we're already put in place because we are now a PEI, and that's what Ian alluded to before with the change to the MOA just recently. There are a couple of hurdles that we've had to go through. So institute is a protected term. So we've had to persuade Companies House that we are the right and proper organisation to use that term, and we have their sort of tacit approval on that, so approval in principle to use that. So when we go forward, if the vote is in favour, we expect the Companies House to just rubber stamp what we've done.
That's what they've now said to us, so that they've referenced this correspondence and
yeah,
it'll be okay.
And we have the support of the Engineering Council and the Royal Academy of Engineering. I think the Engineering Council's response was, why aren't you one anyway?
In fact, he said, we think you're an institute, you should be called an institute, it would help everyone if that was the case.
And I think we've said, and Ian has expanded on it, so we'll set up a new company for the various logistic reasons of swapping the name over or changing the name is just a nightmare. So, and they will run in parallel, so even, you know, paying invoices and things like that. So UCAB membership might still be paid to INCOSE UK, but it will transfer over to IfSE once we get the financial things in place and things like that. So there will be a transition period, which we will manage. Hopefully it will be fairly transparent to yourselves. So membership renewals and things like that will all go through without a hiccup. So where are we now? So, Ian.
Yeah, so we've had a lot of good legal advice this year from the Foundation for Science and Technology, which you've probably never heard of, but they're pretty funded by dinners. Seriously. A few years ago, they were set up as a kind of centrally funded thing to basically help small institutions with their legal issues and advice. They then tried to go to a direct pay-as-you-go model, which just didn't work, and they're now in a model where there's some other charitable dinners happening somewhere else, and money from that, from profits from that, are then pushed back into this and other such bodies to provide that advice to us. So we've been to Gray's Inn several times, lots of chat with a very nice lawyer called Keith, who is also bizarrely also the lawyer that helps the Engineering Council and sits on some of the Privy Council committees. So it's been quite nice to have someone who at some point will turn up and say, yes, that's okay over here, having helped us over here first. That's, you know, seems to be a good way of working the world. So he's been very helpful with just advice on how to adapt the model articles to suit our needs. But the only problem is that because obviously he's a very long-toothed lawyer, he keeps telling me to keep deleting things because he says, well, that's superfluous. It's like working with a guy who wants to do very atomic requirements. And we keep saying, that's fine for you, but we don't have that background knowledge, and actually we need it written down longhand, please, because we're just engineers, we're not lawyers.
Yeah, we don't understand.
So there's been a bit of that going back and forth, but he's been very helpful to us. And it was basically his guidance, so we need to go through the various hurdles in a certain order, so we have the approval in principle first, then go to the Engineering Council and sort of work it through in the correct order so that we actually get to the right place. We still need to go through adjusting INCOSE UK articles to make it a subsidiary, but as far as we can tell, that basically means that IfSE becomes the only member. And that was to bore you, under the Companies Act of 2006, companies are now treated like individuals, whereas the 85 Act, they had to declare their own objects and declare what they were there for. So it's now possible for a company to be a member as an individual, as long as you have different directors. So you can't be both the individual member and the individual director. There has to be some difference. And we're thinking it's probably going to be that the current INCOSE UK directors, so the president, the company secretary and financial director, persist as the officers of IfSE and as the directors of INCOSE UK. Phil's going to have a headache because we're going to have two sets of accounts, and at some point have a director's declaration that allows us to move money from the subsidiary to the main thing once the banking is set up. So that's going to be fiddly, but we sort of know what we're getting into there. We've been planning around having some minimal viable product for launch, so we have to, effectively at the point where we launch, we have to start changing names on things, but we know roughly what that is. Myself and Derek had a few good sessions just to go through what that means. So the website changes, other things change, but a lot of it will just say, we're in transition, bear with us as we go through a rolling update. As you can imagine, there'll be lots of documentation to change, so we will be looking for volunteer help with that where possible, because if there's things you could just help us with, just to literally go through and intelligently change INCOSE UK to IfSE, that would be helpful. And certainly it's the public-facing stuff first that has to change, then it's the other stuff behind the scenes until eventually it's all wrapped up. The Secretariat, of course, have been very busy working out their plans because it's going to hit them hardest. And as part of that, it's been working out what the timelines are for decisions and some tranches for change, because this isn't a one-shot thing. It's going to be over several iterations, and it'll go on probably throughout Malcolm's presidency.
Absolutely. I think as far as Steve's concerned, all our paperwork for professional registration will have to change instantly. As soon as we get that go-ahead from Companies House, we've got to change that. So we operate as IfSE, and the professional registration, as Ian says, that sort of forward-looking element, and they've been quite, adamant on that. But those things will have to change. We can't still go forward and offer things. But the other things, like publications that we've got, they will gradually change over with, branding and things like that. So it is a progressive thing. So so a bit on paperwork. You know more about this. You've got hundreds of books on it.
I do. I literally now have books on how to run companies, how to run charities. We have looked at being a charity and backed away because it's hard. We don't quite know how, and there's a lot more governance in being a charity, so we're kind of backing off to what we understand, which is being a company limited by guarantee.
Although Keith did press us quite hard.
He has, yeah. But he's also then in the next breath said, oh, by the way, 3 people have failed so far this year because they aren't charitable enough. And actually, in chats we've had with the IMEC and the IET, they're charities, they're supposed to exist for public benefit. They're being challenged very hard now to show what their public benefit actually is. And the old argument that the benefit is we regulate the profession isn't washing quite so well. No. So there's a real tension around a lot of the PIs now about the member benefit versus public benefit. And we'd be in that same quagmire if we went down that route. So for the moment, we're very much sticking with what we know. So, the paperwork, it used to be, the old Memorandum of Association was all about, it's a big, long thing that declared all the rights, responsibilities and objects you wanted to have. The new thing is just a list of people. It says, these people subscribe to form this company, and off we go. So this does create the opportunity to be member number 1 in the future, which I will gladly take up. So we end up with a list of subscribers, and then the model articles have moved on an awful lot since the 85 version. They're much leaner and simpler, easy to follow. And that's all we actually need to start with, is just these 2 things. And then effectively other things that we currently have in our kind of more wordy existing articles and memorandum, they'll be in the rulebook, or they'll just go into other documentation as we need to. Yeah. So it's been quite nice to go through all that and sift through what we like and what perhaps we don't like anymore.
It's been a good opportunity to tidy things up, that's for sure. So a little bit more on the articles in the rulebook. There's an overview here. We'll go into in a bit more detail. But as Ian said, the Articles of Association are basically what govern us as a company, as an organisation with Companies House. I'm not going to list out all of that stuff, but Those are what they're governed by and what they're based on. But they have to be approved by members, so that's the vote on the special resolution. We'll be looking at approving those articles and approving us to set up the company IfSE. The rule book will say how we work. And as it says, the rules have to comply with the articles. But a lot of the day-to-day stuff, like saying, you know, directors will make policy and things like that, and how we behave will all go in the rule book. So, key elements of the articles, and interrupt when you want. There are 4 parts. It's fairly simple. The first bit just says what type of company it is, and we're limited by guarantee, so not shares or things like that. Who the directors are, or what the director positions might be, although I think the rule book will go into more detail on exactly what those are, what powers and responsibilities they have, what decisions can be taken, and how they get appointed. And then on members, becoming, ceasing, classes of membership, that was something we wanted to put in the rule book, but the Engineering Council wanted it raised up into the articles, so there will be more on that. How we do general meetings, as Ian's discussed, we'll be able to do them virtually because we just have to be able to communicate and not be face-to-face. And then the rules on voting, and then a load of administrative stuff. So
exactly.
How many pages have they come to at the moment?
It's about 8 pages, I think. It's not many compared to the old one.
How long was the old one?
About 30 or so.
Yeah, so much slimmed down, and apart from the legalese in them, relatively simple. And then our draft rule book, which Ian has spent some time doing, some definitions, more information about directors and what they do, policies, how we structure ourselves as a council. I think we need to go now into standing committees and things like that. So defining what our standing committees are, so things like the ECF, like the UCAB, will sort of fall into that kind of thing. Our members, more detail on the classes and post-nominals and things like that.
Yeah, so if you start looking around, there's been a whole thing with company law around the idea of directors and who's a director, and this idea of shadow directors.
Yes.
So it's been noticed that in some companies, people effectively act like a director, they cause impact like a director, they aren't called a director, but if they transgress, they're treated as if they were, and they'll go after the company for those people and their actions. So it's become quite important that you actually do think about who has direct responsibility and make sure they're listed as such. So we are looking to expand the legal directors to cover a wider range of people.
Because we only had
Whereas currently it's only 5 of us, it needs to be everyone that has an impact on the company going forwards. And the standing committees thing, that's the other thing. There's a whole thing about if you're the chair of a standing committee, then you get to come to the council and have a vote. And so by the way in which we now structure our standing committees going forwards, we can create that kind of bigger framework and allow effectively some key positions to be chairs of standing committees so that the people still turn up at council, but they're now doing it for the right reasons.
Exactly.
Because currently we have a weird situation where people have votes who didn't necessarily need to have them.
Yeah, so everything will become a bit clearer, we think, and set out our relationships with other organisations. We have one clearly through our joint review board with the Institute of Explosive Engineers in terms of professional registration. That will continue, but there will be other things that we can put into the roll book for other organisations that we wish to have relationships with. And then the services we provide, and the final bit is finance and governance. We have to have all that stuff, that, the good stuff that keeps us on the straight and narrow. So this is a bit that got a little bit, that's about the only thing the Engineering Council commented on, I think. There were 1 or 2 other little bits and pieces, but these are what we are proposing as our member classes at the moment. So Ian, if you'd like to just ruffle them on.
Yeah, so effectively, we went forward with the idea that all members should have MIFSE as their post-nominal.
So that's that one.
And that's the starting point for all this. And the pushback we've had is that the Engineering Council would like us to have something different for people who are registered, to make it clear they're registered. And we've said, well, surely CEng does that. But apparently, no, they want a bit more. So it's not uncommon. I've seen other people with similar things. So our IfSE seems to be where they'd like us to go. And to be honest, if it gets us through the hurdle, we'll probably roll over and say, yes, it's not a big deal. The student one, I suggested associate member. They've come back with, they don't know that, associate seems too high. Can we have student member? Now, I thought SMIFTY was too frivolous. Didn't put it in to start off with. And it's come straight back as being their recommendation. So, great bit of influence. We want to have a fellow status. That's the thing which other institutions do, and we should do the same. And a fellow in the kind of the UK style, where it's about leadership, impact management, actually seem to be a leader in your field, as opposed to the slightly nuanced INCOSE fellow thing, which appears to be, as Duncan will tell you, all about publications and who you know that has read the publications, if I'm being a bit honest, I suppose. And so we also want to have honorary fellows, so for those people that we'd like to recognise who perhaps are no longer that active. So effectively, it's that full range of things that other institutions do. We may as well set our stall out right now and do the same. Senior members would basically adopt the appropriate post-nominal for wherever they are in the thing. So if you're a fellow, you're a fellow. If you're whatever, you're whatever. I presume you could be a senior student, it's possible.
Yes.
And then the advisory board members, effectively, it's a different sort of membership. In that case, it's effectively the organisation is the member. They can then send a representative. So there's no post-nominal attached to that because it's not that kind of thing, but it's in there as a class of membership because we have to cover all the bases.
Right, so that's where we are. So what's going to happen next? So we're in this sort of space, wrong thing. Here, all that is sort of coming to a conclusion with the Engineering Council. We've talked about, yes, we've had some ideas, some of them good, some of them not quite so good. So going forward, once we have concluded that and we have the Articles of Association in the right form that the Engineering Council are happy with, then we'll issue our special resolution notice. The articles will be issued to all members for you to review. There will be at least 21 days before we have an extraordinary general meeting at which the vote will take place. Now, because our articles under INCOSE UK require us to have a face-to-face meeting, we have to do that, but we will set up a proxy process. So if you're not able to attend, you will be able to allocate your vote to a proxy who will be at the meeting and will cast. So there'll be one for yes, one for no, and then we'll go forward from there. So, and then the real work starts, because once we've done that, we have 15 days in which to submit all the forms to Companies House. So I think, as we said before, we've got to get everything in place by that point. And then there is a bit wait and see. And once we get approval from Companies House, we have 14 days to make all the essential changes that we have to do by law, and then the rest will follow. So there's bits in there about, we refer on the website to IfSE, professional registration forms. So we can do a lot of that in advance and hopefully, not just push a button and it will happen, but it will be all ready to happen. And then full transition will take place over the next year or so. I think there's a bit more detail on the vote here. So if you'd quite like to take them through that and just...
Yes, as I said, there's a special resolution. It'll have a number of parts to it. There's the one that says the vote in favour of standing up IfSE as a thing, based on the articles you'll have seen. And it is very much these are the articles. We're not asking you to come back and give us changes. We're saying that's what it is. Do you want it or not? It has gone through a large amount of review around the board and around everything else, so we are confident they're in a good state. There's that. There's then, part of it will then say we'll transition your membership across from INCOSE UK to IfSE. And then the other bit is then that the INCOSE UK articles are changed to make them a subsidiary of IfSE. So there's kind of three elements to it, which all work together. As I said, we have to have a face-to-face meeting because that's what our current articles say. And this is a lesson for us about articles and keeping them up to date. And that we've never changed ours since we were formed. So they're basically for a 1990s engineering club. And we should have been changing them as things progressed. We should have been keeping on track. And you'll see other organisations frequently do article changes to keep themselves aligned going forward. As the law changes, we do need to keep on the ball a lot more on this. And then life becomes an awful lot easier. Because in the event of a challenge, current law surpasses whatever your articles say, but your current articles can still hamstring you, so it's a bit of a no-win if you get it wrong. So as it stands, we have to have a physical vote, but we can have proxy voting. So in practice, we can create an online proxy voting registration system. You can go on there, register your intentions, and then that will then be brought to the meeting. We need to have 10% of the membership voting, but then we achieved 24% last year, so hopefully this shouldn't be a big hurdle. Ideally, we'd have done it here. That would have been perfect, but things didn't quite work out. And then it's a 75% majority vote to pass. So once again, we hit 95% last time, but we do need to have that strong in favour vote.
Yeah, and I think that's the timeline. You said when we launch, we'll make all those essential changes, all the membership things will change, and then we'll look at the new classes of membership. We'll stand up the fellowship, hopefully within the next year, 18 months, and then we'll probably just sit back. And I thought TBD should have been
yes.
TBD, shouldn't it? Really, take a deep breath.
I think so.
Yeah, and there'll be other things, and some of it will be governed by you, by our members, that will say this is what we want IfSE to do going forward. So, that's what you're there. We're the council are there to support you, and it'll just be a continuum of going on. And as Ian said, we'll need to go back and look at the articles on a sort of regular basis, not too frequently, but particularly when the law changes and things like that. So over to you. Any questions?
Hi there, it's Jonathan Hart from Rolls-Royce SMR. There was a lot of relative timescales there. Just wondered, when are we actually going to see this first switch? I'm not sure.
So we're hoping to have the vote in January, but it's just down to how quickly we can get through the final steps of the Engineering Council. And effectively, a lot of them, they only sort of work 3 days a week. They seem to meet every Thursday or thereabouts, and it's just hitting the right moment with them to get the things agreed. Can't push too hard, but we do need to keep pushing them to get it. But we think it's just the fellow scheme. So they want a bit more detail how we're going to run our fellow scheme, which effectively is like everyone else does, but we have to write that down so that it's more obvious. And then it's the post-nominals. They've been pushing back and forth on that. But those we think are the two things left. And once they're done, I think they've run out of things to come back on. So it feels really close.
Hello, good morning. Have you got like a constant legal input to remind you that the law's changed, for example, in the future, to change the articles? Yeah, so now we're in touch with the FSD people. They actually publish a regular sort of quarterly bulletin for institutes which tells you these things. So it's been a case of just knowing the right people to talk to, yes. And suddenly it all unfurls. So yes, that's what they're there for, and now we're actually plugged into it. We are getting those bulletins.
Thank you. Derek Price. You were talking about the membership and getting their thoughts and steer on what they want to get from all this. The first thing, I appreciate a lot of the time and effort that's been put in to get it to this point, and thinking of other change programs. Once we've got it agreed and launched, there's a possibility of a bit of fatigue, because there's a lot of effort to get there, and then it's more into the comms and engagement piece. Have you any thoughts about how you want to marshal the resource of the community to give you more bandwidth to help, I guess, refine and develop messages and get the message out? I mean, UCAP stands as a network that's ready and willing to help with that, but we're one part of the community in that way.
Yeah, and I think we'll make that call to our members, and we're a voluntary organisation when it comes to sort of the governance of it and running it. So we might come out and ask individuals if they want to get involved. Set up some working groups and things like that if we have to get things done. But it's sort of work in progress. We need to do it. We know, as you said, we look to the UCAB to provide that. So looking back into the UCAB companies, many of whom will be here anyway, to get involved. But individuals who have a strong view on something or feel that they want to help, then just ask, and we'll set something up to make it happen.
Thanks, Mark. I think it's a good point. I think that people who work for a UCAB member company but don't go to UCAB, please do feel free to contact your point of contact and just to let them know you want to be part of that. Because that's part of the issue, is trawling the group of people that actively want to be part of doing and helping this. So you've got a resource ready to tap into. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm going to ask one. Do you think that choosing the word for instead of helps by putting us alphabetically quite high up that list?
Quite possibly.
Yeah. Like Google.
I suppose so. It'll be AAA. Yeah.
Association.
But no, the fourth thing is hugely powerful. It's a statement of we actually want to be in favour of this thing wherever it's done, rather than trying to claim it's ours, which we just couldn't do.
Hi, Dharmesh Patel from BDA. I've got two quick questions. One is, aside from aligning the name to the other engineering institutions, and of course, you still to be decided for future activities, do you have any other plans to, in terms of what you aim to do with IfSE in the future? Is there any new activities planned around that? And secondly, you mentioned about the student memberships. I mean, aside from the outreach work that Nathan mentioned yesterday, do you have any plans on how to sort of, promote IfSE to undergraduate students who,
Yes.
aren't even really aware about system engineering in the first place?
Yes, we do. So one thing we have thought of is we can decouple student membership from INCOSE membership to allow us to then offer the same as everyone else does in terms of that kind of 30 quid for your degree, that sort of thing. So as it stands, we have to comply with the current INCOSE membership classes around what the student membership means. Once we've gone through this, we're happy to look at that and say, no, we're going to create a UK-specific student membership, IfSE only, that covers you for your degree. Because if you get people early, they'll stay. That's the basic marketing thing, isn't it? So we'd be foolish not to. It's been talked about quite a lot, and it's one of the first things we'll start to do is we start to just loosen the coupling a bit between the two organisations. So we're definitely up for that and trying to make that work. It's then just getting the bandwidth of people to go into universities and start to actually attract the people. And we're hoping that where we have UCAB companies that are part of that, they'll help us out by actually promoting it into UCAB. So that is good. Other thing, we'd like to have more assistant director roles. We'd like to create a kind of a bigger framework that's more explicit, because currently it is a little bit implicit. We'd like to have a bigger, more explicit sort of, this is us, here's our organisation, these are the roles we want to fill, please come along and get involved. Because the more assistant directors and things we have, the more people in different chairs and committees, the more folk are actively involved in doing it, and therefore it's not the same old faces. We want to have a continuous throughput of new people. And we actually want people knocking on the door to take on roles rather than us having to go and find the people knocking their door.
Yeah, I think it's about promoting, and I'm talking to Andrew earlier, I think when we did his interview, about creating more volunteers and active members, and hopefully this can stimulate, there's a lot of people, some great minds out here, and, as Ian says, we want to get more and more people involved in running this institute. It's yours, get involved, become active member. But we still remain a voluntary organisation, with the great support of the Secretariat, who do a lot of the heavy stuff, but we still need to do the governance and policy and things like that, because it's our institute. So,
just to follow up on that, Malcolm, Ian, it's a good point about the student membership and taking that viewpoint. Just a quick plug for what UCAB have been doing with the council. There's a session later this morning on system engineering career pathways to try and figure out how we can improve our footprint and people's entry points. And I think there's a joint council UCAB session tomorrow, which is working about, again, how we can enable and make it more likely, more easy for people to identify system engineers as future career paths. So it's a good question, and it will be one of the priority streams for IfSE going forwards, certainly from a UCAB point of view. Thank you.
Hi, Rob Black. I think I've mentioned in passing with some of other colleagues within the INCOSE family around some of the trends of certification and professional registration and whatnot within APM and project management. With the transition and consolidation of IfSE, some will see that as a splintering and a fracturing within an extended community. Of course, it's it's a coming together with like domestically and an alignment which I support. But when it comes to the sort of the cascading effect of things like a different fellowship designation, there's a political aspect to that, and sort of concurrent with that is the professional registration, the high bar that we have in the UK, and the requirement for masters and things like that. There's a sort of transatlantic tensions, and there's a lot of political aspects to that. I just wonder how we maintain the effective collaboration and unity within the systems engineering global community, and whilst domestically sort of setting ourselves a high bar, and also I think that there's a just clarify as well, ISEC as distinguished from a UK fellows scheme, there's some, you know, why would you do one above the other? So there's quite a few sort of social, political things to navigate. Just interested in any reflections.
Yeah, so if you take the fellows thing first, effectively, for a lot of people in their organisation, they're told, well, not told, but the expectation is put upon them at some point that, why haven't you got a fellow yet? Because if you want to go for that next step up the ladder, you'll need to have some evidence of your worth, and a fellow status is one of those things that people look for. So given that other institutes do that, we'd like to be on that same place to say that's the thing. It's an obvious thing to offer. People want to have it. And the stamp by IfSE that says you are indeed a fellow in system engineering is a thing that a lot of people in this room would like to have, I suspect. So that's a thing, that, and you don't have to explain it to them. I have to explain there's this other thing I've got instead that's similar, but not quite the same. But ESEP is a good offering. I mean, it's a lot of work to get it done, but it's certainly a thing out there which we'll continue to promote. The whole SEP family of things we'll promote because partly the MRA says we have to. We agree to sign up to promoting SEP as part of being a chapter. So it doesn't go away. It's just a different pathway, and it's that certification versus professional recognition type thing. They're both valuable in different ways depending on what you're trying to show people. So it doesn't go away. It's a widening of the offering, I guess. In terms of the harmony with INCOSE, we've been at times quite robust with them. There's been a fair amount of telling them what we're about to do rather than asking permission or forgiveness. And as the largest chapter, it's worked quite well for us actually, because it's been interesting flexing our muscles a bit and seeing what we can do. And it helps, I know, most of the people, so there's a certain amount of kind of, we're doing this for these reasons, and once you're making the logical case, it's kind of hard for them to really pick holes because they can kind of see why we're doing it, what we intend to achieve, and ultimately it's about growing. And we all want to grow, we all want to have a bigger, better systems engineering fraternity worldwide. This is our way of trying to get ourselves reset for growth. So actually, they're bought into it. And they do appreciate the kind of actually changing the name is helpful because it does cause confusion. I mean, certainly when Kerry Luddy, the former president, is involved with the World Academy of Engineering, they're not quite sure kind of where she fits with us. And we have to keep explaining, yeah, she's actually just a member of this thing in Australia, which is part of this thing in the US, which we're also part of in the UK, but we're all different people. We just happen to have the same name recurring the whole time. So it's a good tidy up, and I think once they've got over it, they'll be fine. And equally, as we've said, GFSE has a similar name. There's about half the MRA chapters don't have INCOSE in the name, about half do. So it's not unknown, it's not unprecedented, and probably it's where we should have been in the first place. Only, of course, we couldn't have had institutes, so it would have been society or something. So IfSE, possibly.
Any more? Thank you very much, Ian, Malcolm, for all your hard work. And thank you for everyone taking part. As we say, building this for us. So do get involved. Come see us. We'll be around here. And after this, we're always open. Drop emails. Come see us, and we'll happily continue this conversation. Probably for a number of years to come.
I'd have thought so.
Yeah,
Thank you.
As it says up there,
Gone
back.
So there is an email address.
Yeah, there's an email address. If you think of anything, you can find us around today, but if it comes to you after you get back on the train or on your way home or any time, drop a note into that email address and you'll get a response. Okay, thank you.
And vote yes, please.
Yes, please.